Hey guys, how's it going? Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 1 preview. So it's finally here. It's time to do a Week 1 preview of the matches we will see in the first week of the 2020 season of the Overwatch League. Now, this will be the only week for the next couple of months or so that will feature 2 homestands in 1 week, simply because of the cancellation of the Chinese homestands because of the coronavirus outbreak. So let's make the most of this weekend and let's make it pop off the best we can. And obviously this will be the first time that the Overwatch League has been broadcast on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Overwatch League if you are looking for the stream. So let's go through the fixtures we are going to see for our first week of the 2020 season, and we will start off in New York at the Hammerstein Ballroom, where we will see the Toronto Defiant kick off against the Paris Eternal on Saturday, February the 8th at 6 PM Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. Convert that to whatever time zone you're in for more information. Then we will see the London Spitfire take on the New York Excelsior on the same day at 8 PM, and that will round us off for New York on the Saturday. So, taking a look at these 2 games, it should be quite interesting. I mean, Toronto Defiant and Paris Eternal, in the early days, I think could be pretty well matched, although considering Paris Eternal have to wait on some of their players to be eligible to play because they're too young, I think honestly this first tie could favour the Toronto Defiant ever so slightly. So I would go for a Toronto Defiant win, although I think it could be a pretty close match. Then obviously we got the London Spitfire taking on New York Excelsior. Now, the past 2 seasons this would be a blockbuster match, but on paper these 2 teams look very look at very different skill levels right now. London Spitfire have obviously just completely reworked their roster, and there is still a lot of work to be done at the Spitfire. If they were to get anything out of this New York Excelsior match, it would be a massive shock. New York will go into this as massive favourites, and I would expect New York Excelsior to come out on top against the Spitfire, although Spitfire could make a game of it, and it could make it interesting. But New York are most likely going to run out winners and pretty comfortable winners over the Spitfire this time around. So then we move on to the other 2 games we will see on the Saturday, and these will be after the New York games. We move over to Dallas for their opening weekend of games at the Arlington Esports Stadium. In the first 2 games we will see the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Vancouver Titans on Saturday at 10 PM. Then we will see the Los Angeles Valiant take on the Dallas Fuel at midnight. So this should be really interesting. Gladiators, they are a team that could be boom or bust this season. They're very heavily dependent on their DPS line, and obviously whether Birdring can get back to form like he showed in the inaugural season, but obviously his 2019 season was pretty poor. Vancouver Titans, obviously another boom or bust team when we talk about Fisher. Now, I think the early days will be okay for Vancouver Titans, but as the season draws on, I don't know whether the Vancouver Titans will be able to keep up, especially if Fisher starts to become a bit iffy. And having really no backup apart from Rouge Hong to that main tank role is questionable for the Vancouver Titans, but that's the price you pay if you want Fisher. Now, if it works for Fisher, then it works for Vancouver Titans. They could be right up there with the Shock. But in this early stage of the season, I would back Vancouver Titans to win over the Los Angeles Gladiators. I think they've just got a bit more quality than the Gladiators have got early on, and the team synergy and the happiness within the team really shouldn't be a problem, especially considering they're not going that far because they're still in America anyway. They're not traveling all that much until they move over to China, but then again, those homestands have been called off, so this is probably the last time we're going to see Vancouver Titans for a while. So I think the Titans will have enough to see off the Gladiators, although it could be a really close match. And then obviously the Valiant taking on the Fuel. Now, the Valiant actually have apparently been doing pretty well in scrims, whereas Dallas have been apparently underperforming. Well, that's nothing unusual for the Fuel, is it? Sorry, Fuel fans, that's quite brutal, but true. Valiant, apparently, if you go on the scrims, apparently Valiant should be winning this game. I think it will be pretty close. It could be a game where Dallas Fuel's DPS line of Doha and Decay carry them to a victory, but again, it's a very difficult one to call, but if I was to go on what I've been hearing so far, I'm gonna edge the Valiant, and I didn't think I'd be saying that a couple of weeks ago, so kind of interesting. Now we move on to the games that we will see on the Sunday then, so Sunday, February the 9th. we will start off in New York once again at the Hammerstein Ballroom, where they will kick off at 6 PM. It's going to be the Battle of Europe. It's London Spitfire taking on the Paris Eternal. So this should be a lot more competitive for the Spitfire than the New York game was the previous day. In terms of where these teams are at, it's very difficult to know. I haven't really heard anything about London scrims. All I know is that London's players are quite individually talented, some of them. So this could be a game where London edge out a victory. It kind of needs to be if they want to be challenging for play-ins, because we're not talking about Spitfire being anywhere near the playoffs. If they want play-ins, they kind of have to get victories over the likes of Paris Eternal, although it is very early in the season. Paris Eternal will look at this as a very winnable game. They won this game last season, I believe, in Stage 1. I think they got a shock victory over the Spitfire when Spitfire were actually going to be one of the best teams in the league. So anything can happen, although I would back a London victory just ever so slightly. And then at 8 PM we have the Boston Uprising taking on the New York Excelsior. Now this should be the most one-sided match of the entire weekend. New York should outclass the Boston Uprising massively. Boston, they look trash, and there's nothing we can say about Boston that's good right now, to be quite honest, apart from Myung Bong perhaps, but Boston, they look like the weakest team in the league right now, especially with apparent improvements from the Valiant in scrims. So New York Excelsior should be able to run out pretty comfortable 3-0 winners over the Boston Uprising, and I wouldn't expect anything less, really. But then we move over to Dallas at the Arlington Esports Stadium, where we will see the last two games of the weekend. So at 10 PM on the Sunday, we will see the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Vancouver Titans. Again, this should be an interesting game. This will be a test of the Valiant, without a doubt. If they can get the win over Dallas, then they might be able to test the Vancouver Titans, but again, the Vancouver Titans should have enough quality to see themselves past the Valiant in fairly comfortable fashion if the Vancouver Titans want to be where they want to be in terms of being at the top of the league. They should be able to comfortably see out a win. And then at midnight on the Monday, which technically is the Monday, but it'll be the game straight after the Valiant Titans game, it will be the first game of our reigning champion season, so the San Francisco Shock will be in action against the Dallas Fuel. Now, this should be fairly comfortable for the Shock. If Dallas Fuel were to get anything out of this game, again, it'd be regarded as a pretty massive shock. Pardon the pun, didn't mean it. But Shock, yeah, they should be able, with their quality, to pretty much sweep the Dallas Fuel aside without too many issues. Dallas Fuel, they don't look like a team that can compete this season, to be quite honest with you. They've got some good individual parts, they just don't look like they've got a team. And that's kind of key this season. You need that team synergy and that team cooperation nailed down. Because when Hero Pools comes around, you're going to need the basics, because the technical stuff is going to become quite difficult when Hero Pools comes in, when you've got so much change and so little time to prepare for that change. And I think that's where Dallas Fuel are going to suffer this season, whereas the Shock and Gladiators maybe, depending on whether their DPS line pops off, maybe even the Spitfire, because the Spitfire have got a very varied roster, could benefit. But the problem is with the Spitfire, obviously it's completely new roster, so they got a lot of work to get that team working together. Dallas Fuel, it might work, but I don't think it'll work enough to get them where they want to be. Shock should be able to pretty much sweep the Dallas Fuel aside, and Shock should be up and around there this season anyway. If they weren't, it would be a very big surprise. So that's the first week of fixtures. To be quite honest, there are some fixtures that could be quite interesting. For example, Toronto Defiant Paris Eternal is a very interesting game at the bottom of the league, in what we are ranking at the moment. Toronto, if they really want to be that dark horse of this season, they have to beat the Paris Eternal. And if Paris want to stay in touch when their new Korean talent comes of age, they need to get wins over the Toronto Defiant. So it's kind of a teller kind of game for these two teams, where the Paris Eternal are slightly weaker than they will be at the end of the season. Toronto Defiant are possibly just getting into a place where they might be the strongest they've been so far. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Again, London, New York could be an interesting one, because we really don't know where London are going to fall. It's a bit of a mystery. No one knows what J-Mac, the main tank for London, is going to do. We can kind of get a gist from Shui and Glister, because they're two actually pretty good DPS players. But in terms of the rest of the squad for London, it's very difficult to know where they fall. They could be much better than we expect, they could be much worse than we expect, and be right down there. So this game against New York, it's kind of it could be a teller, or it could be a, hey, take this with a pinch of salt. That's kind of the way it is for London right now. And then obviously Gladiators Titans I think could be a very interesting match. Probably the closest match of the weekend. That should be an absolute teller for Gladiators and their DPS line, whether they can really keep up with higher echelons of the league, shall we say, because Gladiators have always been around that 5th and 6th place, those playoff places, and a lot of people are rating them down this season, and it's up to the Gladiators to prove that wrong. And then obviously it'll be the first time we see Shock in action this season, and I would expect the Shock to carry on just as they were. But that is going to be it for this week's preview. I will be back after the weekend with a results video for the Overwatch League Roundup for all of these games and what happens in them, and basically how the first weekend goes on YouTube and in the homestand areas, because this is the first weekend of the proof of concept for the Overwatch League, and obviously the first weekend of the big move to YouTube, and it'll be interesting to see what the viewership numbers are for the first weekend of games. Also, I wanted to let you know that over the weekend I will be taking a break. Obviously I've been non-stop uploading since before the World Cup. Many times there's been multiple videos a day, so I'm kind of knackered, I'm not going to lie. I want to take a weekend just to watch the Overwatch League. You know, obviously I'll be keeping an eye on it and thinking of the videos that will be coming after that. But on Saturday and Sunday, there will be no uploads on YouTube. And I'm just going to take a little break, and then I'll be back Monday with content. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think it's a break I need anyway. I've been rolling and churning out videos for so long now. I just think I need to take a couple of days just to clear my mind. But anyway, that is going to be it for this roundup. I will be back after the weekend with the results and more content coming your way. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.